Hi team. I was thinking about the resonance strategies that we learned from Brittlin a couple weeks ago that we're incorporating so well. And I thought about how that is impacted by the vowels and the words that we're singing. So I came up with this little presentation, kind of informational video to hopefully help that explain that a little bit better. So here we go. Okay. So when we're thinking about the resonators, the way that they occur in our body, it actually is a space in your body where sound is moving around. So Brittlin talked about 3 different resonators. The first one she talked about was the giggle resonator, which occurs right here in our body. You can see right here and here. There are nasal sinuses on either side of our nose, and also the nasal cavity right in here. So on our bodies, that occurs right here. Okay, so the nasal sinuses are right here, and then the nasal cavity is right behind there. Then we think about the second resonator she talked about was the passion resonator. And so she talked about that as a kind of a width resonator. And that happens right back here in the pharynx, which is kind of the space between your larynx, where our sound and our vocal folds are housed. Our sound comes from here, and the soft palate, which is up here. So right in here is where the pharynx is. That's our passion resonator. It's an actual open space in the back of your throat. And then the third resonator she talked about was the height resonator. And that one is your frontal sinus, which occurs up here. You see it in green, or here on this side. And that is an actual space, again, in your head, but it occurs right here on our body. But we think about this as kind of spinning our overtone up and out. And that height resonator is really important for that. And so that's why we use that cue. Another way to look at this in our bodies anatomically, these resonators. So we have the starting in the same order with the giggle resonator. Again, you see this whole space right here is hard surfaces, and it's the nasal passage. It doesn't mean that all of the sound moves through that passage. It just means that the bone is kind of propagating the sound through there. It's a lot of hard surfaces propagating the sound in that open space. Then secondly, we have the passion or the width resonator. That's right here. You can kind of see that space right here, also an open space. We think about this as widening the width resonator. We use these cues kind of at the back of our base of our neck right here. Thinking about opening that space up in the back of our throat, we want to make sure we're doing that without tension, but we're utilizing this space. It's easy and comfortable to get into this space, but this space by itself doesn't resonate with other people very well. It doesn't ring very well, and that's what we're looking for when we're singing barbershop. So this space by itself is one that's easy to get into, but not one we want to spend all of our time in. And then we have the height resonator, which is up here. You can see this open space right here is the that frontal sinus. So you can see where that's happening from this view as well. So that's cool. So we know that we have all these resonators. We have all these open spaces in our head that are helping us enhance the sound. That's what resonance is. It's enhancing sound. So we know that we have all of this, but how does that apply to our singing? How does it apply to our vowels? So in English, we have all these different vowels. This is specifically in English because we only sing barbershop in English. So thinking about this is high, this is low, and this is back. Okay, so this is front and this is back. So as you say these vowels going down, think about what happens to your tongue while you say them. So go ahead with me. E, I, a, Notice how your tongue lowers in your mouth as you say all of those vowels. Try again. E, I, a, ah. So your tongue is close to the floor of your mouth when you say ah. But the sound is still kind of happening in the front middle part. This is, again, toward the middle of your mouth. But these are all happening very close to the front of your mouth, as opposed to these back ones. So let's try this. Oo, o, ah, ah. Notice how, again, your tongue lowers, but the sound feels farther back in your mouth. Let's try that again. Oo, o, ah, ah. So again, your mouth is almost fully open when you sing ah, and the sound is really far back there. Something to think about, ah and ah is a dialectal distinction that some people don't make in their speech. They are actually two different vowels with two different tongue movements, but in certain areas of the country, it's a distinction that isn't necessarily made in speech. Same thing with I and eh. So it's just something to keep in mind. You see these lines here? These are representing diphthongs, which is when we have two vowels that are kind of stuck together to create a new sound. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So what about the vowels? We know the resonators, we know the vowels, but how do they fit together? How does this vowel quadrangle, or vowel quadrilateral, how does that fit with how the resonators are in our body? Well, the vowel quadrilateral actually represents the oral cavity, right? So here is your front teeth, the top of your front teeth. This is the middle of your mouth. This is kind of the back of your throat where you swallow. And this is your soft palate. It fits right here. And that's where all of those vowels occur, right there in your oral cavity. So your oral cavity is actually your vowel space. So that, in relationship to your resonators, adds a whole new dimension to singing vowels, doesn't it? So thinking about that vowel quadrilateral in reference to the oral cavity makes us think about which resonators we use for different vowels a little bit more closely. Before we move on, notice how big the tongue is. So see this muscle right here, this kind of C-shaped muscle? That's the tongue. It's really big, okay? It takes up a lot of space in there. And so because of that, it's easy to get in the way or distort our sound. And it's soft, so it doesn't help the sound move forward necessarily. So it's not necessarily something that helps in resonance. So we try to keep it out of the way as much as possible without adding tension to our sound. All right, so moving on, here's our vowel quadrilateral inside our oral cavity, right? So here you go. There's your high front vowel right there at the back of your top front teeth. There's your oo right there in your soft palate, and your ah right there at the base of tongue where you're about to swallow. And then all the vowels in between. So thinking about that, certain vowels are closer to certain resonators. E is really close to that giggle space, isn't it? Ah is practically in the passion or width resonator. It's right there in the pharynx. So those, and when we think about that, those vowels tend to resonate in those spaces more easily. So thinking about that, if the vowels resonate or enhance sound best in the resonator that they're closest to, the E is a high front vowel. So it resonates easiest in the giggle space. And we do this in chorus, don't we? We go, I'll get you, my pretty. It's right there in that giggle space. All of those sounds happen right there in that giggle space, and it's easy to put that vowel there. It's harder to place the E vowel in other spaces. So when we place the vowel in other resonators, it doesn't resonate as strongly. So thinking about putting the E in the passion place or the width place, you can do that, but but it sounds real weird and it feels real weird, and there's a lot of tension in it. Same thing if you try to put the E in the height space. It's weird and it feels weird, and I'm manipulating my tongue to do it. Same thing with oo. So if we're looking at oo is here as a high back vowel. And like we said, sound moves through the space. So it's actually kind of moving through the bone and up into that frontal resonator. And so that's why oo is a high vowel, because it's closest, as a high back vowel, it's closest to the height resonator. And so it most easily resonates in that space, right? Ooh, ooh, ooh. It is easiest to sing in that space. Now, if we try to put ooh in the giggle space, we can do it, but it sounds terrible. And it's also distorted in the production of it. Now try putting it back in your passion resonator and your width resonator. Ooh, ooh, ooh. You can do it, but again, there's a lot of tension in that sound, and there's a lot of tension in what's happening in the oral cavity to create that sound. And that's when you're just using one resonator primarily, or one resonator alone to create that vowel sound. Now let's look at the ah sound right here in this low back space. So ah is a low back vowel, so it resonates easiest in the passion place. But we can put it in the other resonators. So if we put ah in the giggle space, ah, it's possible. It's not pretty, but it's possible, and it doesn't necessarily sound natural. What about if we tried to put ah in the height space? Ah, you can do it, and it sounds better than some of your other options. And it may actually, ah in the height space may be appropriate in other areas of singing, but in barbershop, we really like a more complete resonance. So, obviously, we just showed that singing the vowel in one resonation space alone is not a complete sound, and it's harder to sing with other people, resonate with other people, when we're singing in just one resonation space. So, let's try mixing them. E, naturally a quote-unquote giggle vowel, but close to the height place. So if we add height, that's equal with the giggle, and then add a little width. So let's add the height first. So E is height. Now if we add, so E, E, now add width, E. So now you have a more full, complete sound. Thinking about oo is naturally a height vowel, but it's high like a giggle, and it's a back vowel, so it's also fairly close, the production of it is fairly close to the passion or width resonator. So when we want to facilitate the other resonators in an oo vowel, we can think about aiming our sound at the back of our top front teeth, so that's close to the giggle space, right? So if we're aiming here, right? Because oo is here, so we're going to move that sound or aim that sound a little bit farther forward. So if we have ooh, ooh, you can hear the sound move forward a little bit. And then just thinking about passion, just thinking about width, because it's already a back vowel, will actually add some of the width that we're looking for. Remember, we don't want to go too far with those width resonators because that's not a very clear tone. So when we add, so we go from the height to the giggle to add the resonate, to add the width. So we go, ooh. Subtle changes, but it makes a more complete sound. Something to note about the oo vowel is that it's naturally resonant, it's naturally more resonant because it more naturally incorporates all of the resonators, right? So it's high like a giggle, and it's back like a passion, and it naturally is in the height place. So it incorporates all of the resonators more naturally than some of the other vowels do. So thinking about ah, which is that low back vowel, again, naturally a with or a passion vowel. And similar, let's go back to our vowel chart real quick. Similar to how oo was close to a lot of the resonators, or we could use a lot of the resonators pretty naturally with it, ah is pretty far away from all the resonators. It's right here in that pharynx, but it's not really close to the frontal or the giggle resonator. So we have to work a little bit harder with ah to incorporate those other resonators, okay? So because it's naturally a with vowel and not really close to anything else, it's a little bit harder. But if we, again, aim the sound at the back of the top front teeth, we can incorporate that giggle. So it's going to move the sound forward a little bit. Right? It moves the sound forward. And then, we do this in our course a lot, we consider a hybrid production with something that's closer to the middle, like an vowel. Right? So going back to our vowel quadrilateral, happens right here. So instead of this low back vowel, we kind of put it somewhere in between ah and so we can achieve that height vowel. Oops, sorry, I went too far. Right, so thinking about now we have ah, so we made it, we aimed it at the back of our front teeth for the giggle, and we made it a little bit of a hybrid with an or a mid vowel so that we could incorporate some of that height. So we went so we incorporated all of those different resonators. What about the other vowels though? As we can see, there's a lot of vowels in this chart. The ones we just went over are not the only ones. So what do we do about them? Well, we want to look at the chart and feel where the sound occurs in our singing space. Everybody's singing space is different. I just gave you those examples. They're not perfect. But my space is going to be different from your space. And how I feel that in my space is going to be different from how you feel it in your singing space. So look at the chart and play around with it. Feel where some of those vowels happen in your singing space, and look at where those principal resonators are. What are you using as your principal resonator for maybe an ah vowel, or maybe an vowel, or an a vowel? What is your primary resonator for that? And then use that same principle to apply to those in-between vowels that we used with the e and the oo and the the e and the oo and the ah. We are self-aware singers, so be self-aware and apply it to this. Like we said, your body is different from anybody else's. And so how you sing it, you may incorporate, if you're naturally a more giggle resonant singer, you may need to incorporate more height. Or if you're naturally a more passion with space singer, you may need to incorporate more giggle. So knowing your body and knowing what your natural resonance is predisposed to will also help you kind of adjust to these different vowel sounds. So as you're trying these vowels, think about what the primary resonator you're using is, and then record it. So do you feel what you're singing? And then when you hear it, does it sound like it feels? And then make adjustments. What secondary resonators can you incorporate to make that more full, complete sound that we've been really working on? So, diphthongs. Diphthongs are a combination of vowels moving from one space to another space. So here you have bout, like about, and that's an ah or an ah, moving to an oo. Ow, right? Or boy is a diphthong of aw, moving to e. Oi. And notice how this aw is kind of halfway between the aw and the o, because when you put two vowels together, it kind of changes the production of both of them, creating a new sound. Same thing with bite. You have an ah into an e. Some people use an I, right? So it's I. You can hear those two vowels when you slow it down, but obviously we don't always say it that way. So again, how do we incorporate this in our singing? Well, if we're combining two vowels in succession to produce a different sound, like the ones that are here, we want to think about what's the primary vowel, what vowel occurs first, because that's the one that we usually hold, and what's the resonator that we're incorporating for that. And then thinking about what the secondary vowel is. And what is the resonator for the secondary vowel? Are they the same? Are they similar? Sometimes, like for I, it's probably going to be similar because it's all in that mid-front place. But for oi, no, it's probably not going to be the same. And so we want to think about what resonator am I using for the first vowel and for the second vowel, right? So this one's probably going to be more likely passion because it's kind of in the middle and the back. And this is going to be closer to the giggle like we talked about earlier. So when we think about that, well, we know we want to add some giggle when we're in that back passion space to make that more complete sound. And with E, we also know we want to add some more passion to create that more complete sound. And so we're thinking about when we say those diphthongs, we're really incorporating both of those to create a complete resonance, but kind of finding a happy medium, not all of one or all of another. And again, you're going to want to kind of play with this on your body and play with this in your singing space to determine what those resonators feel like and how much adaptation you're making when you change those diphthongs. Remember, we are singing usually, well, we try for a 50-50, but at the very least, we're doing a 70-30, which means we hold the first vowel for at least 70% and the second vowel for 30%. We would like it to be 50-50, but sometimes that's hard. So all of the resonators need to be in play for us to make a full complete sound when we turn that diphthong, so it doesn't sound like something different. So it doesn't catch the audience's ear and detract from the meaning of the actual lyric. Which brings us to the next thing. How do we apply this to our songs? How does this impact how we actually sing? Well, phrases in songs usually rhyme. And so when we think about that, what's the vowel or diphthong in those rhyming words? How do we resonate that vowel or diphthong? What's the primary resonator of that? And how do we incorporate the other resonators? Is that vowel, the rhyming vowel, is that the constitution of the rest of the phrase? So is that the primary vowel throughout the phrase? So for example, Mary had a little lamb. The rhyme is on lamb, and that's an a vowel. But Mary had also rhymes, also a vowels. So the primary vowel throughout that phrase is an a vowel, which we know is a low or mid front vowel. So that's going to be in the giggle place, right? It's easy to put that in that kind of Wicked Witch of the West. It's easy to put that in there. Mary, Mary. Obviously, we don't want to sing it just like that, but it goes there most naturally. So we, because it's low, but it's which is close to the passion place, there is a nearness to that, so we can add a little bit of passion, and it will absolutely need, that vowel does need some height. And so since we know it's going to be a giggle, we know also how to add the other resonators in there to balance that for, again, that most complete sound, using all of our resonators. What about when the rhyming vowel isn't the same vowel throughout the phrase? So twinkle, twinkle, little star, star is the rhyme word. The vowel is ah. But twinkle, twinkle, the vowel in that is primary E. So when we think about the rhyme for star, it's a low back vowel. It's an ah. Quick note, when it's star and it has an R on it, we treat that like a diphthong. So it's R, but it's R. So we use ah as the primary vowel for that. It's a low back vowel. in the width or passion place primarily. So that's going to need some giggle. It's going to need equal parts of giggle and height to bring it into a more singable, complete space. But the twinkle, twinkle, the primary vowel of the phrase is E, which is a high front vowel. It's completely opposite. Remember our vowel chart. It's completely opposite from ah, which is back here, to E, which is up here. So when that's the primary vowel of the phrase, it's the high front vowel in that giggle space primarily. So we need to use equal parts of height and passion. Well, we know that once we get to the end, we're going to fall into the passion most easily. So we want to sing with the height, in the giggle space, but with the height and the passion or width throughout the phrase. And then when we get to the star, we want to borrow that giggle that we've been using throughout the phrase. Resonance strategies are not the same in this phrase, and they're likely not going to be the same. But it's kind of fun to think about the phrases that we sing in our songs and what the rhyme vowel is and what the phrase vowel is and how we're using those resonators throughout. So what are our takeaways? Well, we need all of our resonators all the time for great singing. Our bodies are created with the resonators naturally, so we should use them to our advantage. And also remember that every person's body is created differently. Every person's body has a natural inclination to a certain resonator. Know what that is for you, and know what other resonators you're trying to incorporate into your sound, so that when we get together on the risers and we're singing together, we're creating that full, complete sound all together as a chorus. All right, team, I hope this made sense. Please hit me up with questions if you have them, and I hope we'll be together soon. Bye.